Welcome to this meeting of the Mid Suffolk District Council Planning Committee. May I first remind you all of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, the ground floor area and the walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not lifts. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. So before we begin, there's some introductions. We have the members who will be making the decision on my right. We have the Area Planning Manager, Gemma Walker. We have the Legal Advisor, Christine Flitner. We have the Case Officer, Bron Curtis, who will be presenting via Teams. And we also have Isaac Stringer, another planning officer to support. We have governance officers Claire Philpott, Mandy Smith and Alicia Norman, who are keeping the meeting on track. And we have the ward member, James Caston. So can I move to the agenda? So item number 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Davies, Councillor Matheson and Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Penny is substituting for Councillor Davies and Councillor Lay is substituting for Councillor Matheson. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No? Item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Are there any to declare? I think we've all been lobbied by on the one case. Councillor Lay, have you had any lobbying emails? No, but I think the main members of the committee and Councillor Penny, you've had them, yeah? I think we've all been lobbied. Item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. We've all been on a organised site visit today. We don't need to declare that because that's not a personal one. Has anyone been and visited the site on their own at any other occasion? No. So item number 5, MPL 23/12, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 13th of September 2023. We have an amended version of the minutes which are included in the tabled papers. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of those minutes? So could I please have a proposer to accept those minutes? Councillor Haddingham, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Warboys, thank you. Now I think we're going to do this vote by show of hands because we've got a couple of people struggling with the mod.gov. So we'll just do a show of hands to accept to approve the minutes of the meeting. If you're for approving the minutes. So that looked like...
yes, thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. Thank you.
So the minutes of the meeting have now been confirmed and will be signed in due course. Item number 6, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair. Thank you.
Only got the one planning application today. DC 21-04711, land north of Ty Lane, Bramford, Suffolk. And I will now invite the case officer, Bron Curtis, to introduce the application to the committee. Thank you, Bron.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. I'll just run you through your table papers to start with, because there's quite a lot of information in there, just to make sure that you're happy with what you have. So starting on your page 16, you have a joint local plan update. That's following the publication of the inspector's report that we received last week on the main modifications. Those pages 16 to 19 also include an updated description of the development of this application, which clarifies the maximum capacity of the development as 49.9 megawatts AC, and also an updated recommendation, which includes a new condition from the recommendation that you were being asked to consider last time, which deals again with capacity and asks for, limits the capacity, but also asks for periodic submission of evidence to demonstrate the capacity generation. Moving on then, pages 20 to 26 are an email trail of communications between myself and a local resident objector. And that is to do with, in the first instance, works being carried out on site within recent days and weeks, and also a second query about the capacity of the installation. You can see my various responses to those queries. Then moving on to pages 27 to 33, you can see communications between myself and the applicant EDF, which add to that discussion to clarify the capacity issue. And then moving on to page 34, there is a statement on behalf of EDF by Evershed's solicitors, which deals with the capacity issue in a slightly more legal language. Hopefully they all make sense for you. You've also got some plans which you will have seen in at the site visit, hopefully, and I have in the presentation. So I'll run you through that, but do please stop me at any point if you have a question. So I realise you've seen the slideshow before, and there's not a lot of difference. It's just some additional plans which add some context to some of the issues that came up at the last meeting. So I won't spend a lot of time, but do let me know if you want me to go backwards or forwards between slides. Application site is land to the north of Ty Lane in the countryside, close to the village of Bramford. Just to give you the context on an ordnance base, you can see the extensive right-of-way network, the series of highway network. You can also see overhead lines, which you will have seen on your site visit this afternoon. And you can also see at the bottom of the screen, let me just change that pointer, cable route, which leads down to Bullen Lane and then to the National Grid substation at the end of Bullen Lane. The application site in context with planning constraints, you can see the areas of flood extent, the areas of designated SLA, special landscape area, and other rights of way. This plan shows the split of agricultural land classification for the purposes of best and most versatile land, your current policy CL11. Approximately half the site is grade 3A, which is BMV, and the other half grade 3B or non-agricultural, which is not BMV for the purposes of policy. Block plan just showing the layout of the development across the site. And there is an extract there showing elevation of the solar panels. This plan is included to show you the relationship of the site, which is shown hatched on the right hand side here, relative to other developments that are either granted or proposed and currently under consideration in the immediate area. So you will also have seen on your visit this afternoon part of the site for the Stackcraft development, which is on the southern side of Tie Lane, and you will also have seen part of the site for the ENSO development, which has planning permission from both Babel and Mid Suffolk. You may also have continued on to Bullen Lane, where you could have seen the National Grid substation, which this project would connect. Elevation view of solar panels. You will have seen the proposed site entrance from Tie Lane, leading as it does to an existing agricultural pad and then grain store. This plan shows the works to improve that access and create an access dedicated for the solar installation, but also the creation of passing bays on Tie Lane to improve highway safety, specifically for the construction phase of the development. And then there are 3 passing bays proposed. So this is a cropped plan just to show you how they are staggered along Tie Lane back towards the B1313 Lorraine Way. Mitigation planting proposals. This is a little bit more detail than you saw last time, just with some colouring to pick out the detail of the planting belts close to the residential properties, so along Rutters Farm, Rutters Cottages, Copenhagen Cottages, and Tyview Cottage, and I have those in a bit more detail, which hopefully you were able to get a sense of when you were on site this afternoon. Planting along the boundary there with Rutters Cottage, Rutters Farm, around the southern edge of the boundary with Copenhagen Cottage, and in proximity to Tyview Cottage. Then you probably don't need to see these because it will be fresh in your mind from actually what it was like on site, but just to take you very quickly through the views of the site and some of the views from the highway. You have a general landscape setting, and moving on to some wider landscape setting images and some visualization images as well. So a reminder of the development is for a renewable energy generation scheme. The expectation is that that would generate the approximate electricity needs of 14, that's a typo, I didn't change it from last time, sorry, 14,500 average homes. And there's the carbon offset as well. We have had some questions last time about grazing and grass, and we have confirmed with EDF that that is possible, perfectly possible to combine the two and to have an agrivoltaics type development. And there might be some more information on seed mix if you want to get into the detail of that. So I'll just remind you of the recommendation you have in the report and the advice from officers is to grant planning permission subject to conditions to mitigate the various impacts of the development, not to diminish the impacts of the proposal, particularly in terms of landscape impact. We recognise that there would be a significant adverse impact and a significant change to the character of the landscape in the area, and that would be a material change, particularly to the experience of rights-of-way users and highway users, that there would be an impact on best and most versatile land through the removal of the part of the site that is BMV for the period of life of the development, but that development is time limited and reversible, and that there is information to suggest that the development would result in an overall betterment of the potential of the land for food production for future generations, and that the heritage impact, that Rutters Farm is a grade 2 listed building, so the development does lie within the setting of that listed building, but that the conclusion of your officer is that the contribution of the landscape setting to the significance of the asset is not so much as would warrant more than a low level of harm, and that has been weighed in accordance with the balancing exercise required by legislation, and that the public benefits of the development, being the renewable energy generation and contribution to net zero and a low carbon economy, are considered to outweigh that harm. And then on that point, I have also to remind you of the underpinning principle of making decisions on planning applications, the Planning and Poultry Purchase Act, which requires consideration of whether a development is in accordance with the development plan when read as a whole, and that where a development is, it should be granted. Where it is not in accordance, it should not be granted unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. So there's kind of two elements to that. And you'll see in the assessment that I have said that there is a good level of general accordance with the plan when read as a whole. There is some tension with the policies that deal with best and most versatile land and landscape and visual impacts in particular, but that there are material considerations that indicate that planning permission should be granted. And I have given a rundown of what they are in the report, and that is what then justifies the recommendation that you have, which is updated in your tabled papers on 18 and 19, pages 18 and 19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bron. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. When is this, I want to say Skycraft, but I think it's something else. I think that's a game that my son plays. Is it, whatever it's called, the Skycraft one, when is that coming on board?
The application is submitted and it's been through an initial round of consultation. The applicant has asked that we delay determination of the application because they want to make some design changes. I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow to understand a bit more about what those design changes might be and the time frame for them to submit that information. That would then need to run through a new round of publicity and consultation to enable everybody to have a look at that and to submit any amended or additional comments before it was written up and would come back to committee.
Thank you. Yeah, you another question?
So it could be in a matter of months, like 3 months maybe?
It's unlikely to be that quick, but within the next 6 months is more likely.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Elkin, and then we'll have Councillor Penn.
Thank you, Chair. We walked through this site this afternoon and there were quite long areas of footpath that were very open, and I think my understanding from the papers is that the public rights of way officer preferred that rather than hedging to create narrow corridors. Can I just check, is that something that was the PROW officer's recommendation? Was it discussed with the parish council at all? Just sort of, yeah, I'm just curious about how that decision came about, if you know the history of that one.
City Council have some fairly standard guidance on how development like this should relate to rights of way and how rights of way should be to be protected and to ensure that users can maintain access through development. What that says is that you should avoid over enclosing rights of way, so you should avoid tunnelling, but there's a balance to be struck between the visual impact on rights of way users and that tunnelling effect. So there wasn't any discussion with the parish council about the mitigation proposed, but there was quite a bit of communication between the applicant and your landscape advisor. So what you have in your recommendation is that in addition to the information that's already submitted as mitigation proposals for some planting along the southern side of part of footpath 8, which is one of the footpaths that you walked, the one that goes east-west, so that the development is screened from views from the right of way there, but not on the northern side of that right of way, so it's not enclosed.
Did you have another follow-up, or was that it?
No, I was just thinking.
Councillor Penny.
Yeah, I was going to ask a different question, but I'll ask a follow-up question to that one. So, were planting to take place on the northern side, but only on one side of the footpath, I believe that wouldn't amount to a tunnelling effect. Would there be scope for that, as far as you know?
That is outside the red line site boundary, but I believe may well be in the control of the applicant, or may be capable of being in the control of the applicant. But it would depend how much planting, to what extent, and whether that was together with the planting on the southern side, as to whether that would be something that the rights of way team and the landscape officer would encourage. So it might be something we would have to take away and discuss with those parties, and for the committee to delegate that to officers to reach a position of mutual agreement between those parties, rather than dictating perhaps where planting should go at this stage.
Did that answer your question, or do you have something? Do you have another query?
I don't know how to phrase it as a question, but I was thinking that the fencing is not particularly sightly. Particularly where it's near properties, it creates an impression. I'm trying to avoid using the word a prison-like impression. And do you think hedging or a substantial wildlife corridor might be preferable in those areas?
So the fencing that is proposed, I have a photograph. Oh, it's on screen at the moment. That's the sort of thing. So it's stock-proof fencing. That is something that could be erected on the land now without the need for planning permission. So that's the first thing to say, just to give the context of that, and that sort of enclosure is not uncommon for certain agricultural operations, just to deal with deer and other wildlife. But in terms of the outlook from individual properties, we have the plans that I showed you a little earlier on in the presentation. Let me just pop back to them. So the proposal is for some planting belts which respond to that, respond to the views, the dominant views of the development from the properties. It's also worth bearing in mind that there is no right to a view in planning, so that is not a material consideration, a person's view of a thing. But outlook is a different thing, and that is an amenity issue. So the two can be difficult to distinguish, but it is the sense of enjoyment of one's property, and whether that is dominated by a particular thing within the view of you enjoying your own property. So the applicant has included the planting belts to mitigate the visual impact along those, in particular those three groups of properties.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll discuss the benefits or disbenefits of planting when we come to debate. Councillor Hardingham, you have a question.
Point of information, which is footpath 8? I know I should be aware of exactly where it is.
Footpath 8, I'll just show you on the plan. Footpath 8 is the one that goes from, let me show you a plan that's, so it's this one that goes from Copenhagen Cottage, and then it comes out towards Tyview Cottage. Let me just show you a wider. So, sorry, I've not got the right pointer on, have I?
Bron, can you make that full screen? Because that's it, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it's the footpath we walked on from Copenhagen Cottage to Tide Green.
That's right, it's that one. Let me just change this pointer, sorry. It's that one that goes east-west, and you took it up around Copenhagen Cottage here, and you will have gone to Tyview Cottage there. So the landscape officer's advice is, in addition to the planting already proposed, for some planting along the site boundary on the southern edge of footpath 8. Just there.
Thank you. Any further questions of the officer? Councillor Penny.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask was the in connection with the correspondence in the table papers about the capacity of the site. And it is mentioned that the output would be capped. Is there an implication might be that the size of the site is larger than it needs to be to create the 67.5 megawatt output? Or is that something I should ask to the developer?
The developer may well be able to give you more of an explanation as to the technology and equipment that they're installing and why they need what they need in order to achieve the capacity. But the chair may also be able to give you some physics on the way that peak capacity for installed capacity translate to actual generation capability, and how you get transmission losses when you are converting from DC to AC, and various other things. Sorry.
And the physics.
Councillor Warboys.
Yep. Thank you. Do I have some more information about the containers which are being used for, I believe, for the inverters? I think I've identified them. They're little black rectangles, but there's 4 of them along the section, I believe, by Rutter's Farm. Can you confirm that? And what colour are they going to be? Are they bare metal, black or orange?
I might have to come back on to you in that, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, I think they'll...
Just here.
Oh yes,
I think they're the little rectangles on the sort of access track. There's like little turning hammerheads and a little grey rectangle. I think those are the, I think they're containers, are they?
Did that help with the pointers? So you've got...
I think, Councillor, were you asking what colour they were going to be?
Yes.
I'll come back to you on the colour. I don't have... the applicant may well be able to tell me off the top of their head, but I don't have that handy, but I can find it out from the submission documents.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of them, and I think they're going to be as much of an impact as other items.
Okay, well, maybe we can ask the applicant about the containers. Are there any further questions from members? If not, I will now invite the public speakers to address the committee. So I think first we have Caroline Walton from Bramford Parish Council, and you will have your 3 minutes. So if you press the button on the mic when you're ready, and I will use my high-tech timer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bramford Parish Council was delighted that at the last meeting you made the important decision to visit the site for the EDF proposal. We hope that seeing it for yourselves, you now have a greater understanding of our reasons for objecting to this application and ask you support us in refusing it here today. We hope your visit answered lots of your questions, but mostly we hope it is making you ask more. However, Bramford Parish Council still wishes to understand that with evidence to show this application is generating 70 megawatts of solar power and not below the 50 megawatts threshold, which allows it to go through Mid Suffolk as the LPA, is it for you to decide its outcome? We have concerns that the planning officer continues to justify this application being decided here when evidence shows it is an NSIP. You must decide if this is correct. We challenge this information, but we have evidence from the National Grid saying it is registered on the TEC register at 57 megawatts. We must protect our landscape. You've seen the rising land from the village, if developed, will be highly visible from both locally and Ipswich.
Your landscape officer stated that there would be significant landscape harm and proposed screening was inadequate, which you have all seen today, with vast borders of the development with no planting or sympathetic screening proposed and lost views. You've seen the site engulf Little Sage caravan site and Copenhagen cottage with little screening provided. This business that sells itself on rural identity is under threat. You visited properties including Grade 2 listed, also bordering on the development, that have been given little screening with panels within metres of their boundary. This application is more than double the size of Enzo application recently passed at appeal. The 210 acres of agricultural land, which at least 50% is Grade 3A, classed best and most versatile, must be protected and used for growing our food, to reduce importing and provide jobs for our local farmers. Agricultural production would cease completely on this land, as EDF are asking for change of land use in this application title. There is no plan for sheep grazing, and panels are too low for such, as sheep would cause severe damage to them. The protected skylark nesting seemed to be addressed by the developer, with mention of mitigation. Your own ecology officer has a holding objection due to the threat of this protected species, so it is essential this is completed. The single-track road of Ty Lane, which you experienced today with its quiet lane status, I hope you agree, is inappropriate access to the solar farm and unsafe for the users of such a road. This is a national cycle route, has no pavement, consists of blind bends and hills, and is regularly used by equestrians. The cumulative impact is overwhelming for Bramford and its surrounding communities. 210 acres here, 86 acres by Enzo, and 122 by Statcraft. All solar facilities adjacent to each other is overdevelopment. There is no exceptional reason for this development. Just because these fields are close to the substation, making it more cost-effective for the developer, does not make it the right location for a solar farm. We must acknowledge the major impact these projects have on our local environment and ensure that sustainable energy does not come at any cost, but must be placed in an appropriate location with less impact on our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Just over the 3 minutes. I thought that sounded like your last sentence, so I'll let you carry on. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of the Parish Council? Councillor?
Thank you. We walked along the very open track today. I think it was footpath 8. I was a little bit confused when Bron was speaking that there was mention of some hedging. When we were all there this afternoon, my understanding was that most of that doesn't have hedging at the moment, and it will have solar panels coming fairly close up either side. In terms of sort of community views, the Public Rights of Way officer would prefer there not to be a tunnelling effect, and you to have an open view over the fields. I don't know if you feel able to speak on behalf of the community. If your view of fields is now a view of solar farms, would large hedges and a tunnelling effect be preferable?
It is a difficult question, and I think most fields, the different views, you have different feelings on it. I think we as a parish council feel it softens the appearance of the panels. It's going to be a long time till those hedges are tall enough. They say they're going to grow them to 3 metres, so that's a lot of years' growth. So it does soften. On that footpath 8 we walked today, as we were walking, the right side by Copenhagen is obviously not in the plan, the left is, and I think planting on that left side is essential, because you can't view across there because it's on higher ground anyway, but it does then make it quite a tower. But there are lots of places where planting could be improved. We'd like to see some on the entrance to Copenhagen on that track, to avoid that just being fencing and then panels. It's not a very nice greeting for the people who are coming for a holiday and the residents there. So I think there's lots of planting that could be improved, and I would very much like the parish council to have an input on that, because we have a tree ward and we pride ourselves in making sure with our applications that we decide on native tree species, things that are good for the environment, things that are local. So we would very much welcome to be involved in the planting, but I do think the planting in lots of areas needs to be better and improved.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone else got a question? Councillor Penny?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, would, in your opinion, would the community like to be involved in not only deciding what is planted, but perhaps helping to maintain it and care for their...
I couldn't comment on maintaining because that obviously comes at a cost. But certainly we are a community who involve the school and the scouts and people like that in planting, and so we could make it a community event and things like that is a possibility. But maintaining might be difficult because that all costs.
I just happened to notice the horticultural supplies at Rutter Farm.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a local enthusiasm for...
Certainly the
wildlife
community is
corridors.
very keen gardeners and enjoy the outdoors, but I don't know. That horticultural business sadly has come to an end and is currently closing, so they will be there no more. But certainly we support planting.
If there aren't any other questions, I'd just like to ask the officer a question, which was brought to mind by what Caroline Walton was talking about, the skylark mitigation, which there is a holding objection. Now, whilst we were on the site visit this afternoon, we were told about, I think it was like a sort of triangular field just to the north along Somersham Road, which was going to be used for the skylark mitigation. I think that might have been the applicant talking about it. Has that been agreed yet or not, or is there still some dispute about whether there's sufficient skylark mitigation? Thank you.
It's been agreed in principle. The your ecology officer and the ecologist representing the applicant are just discussing the detail of how that would be delivered. But the suite of conditions, I have already had a recommendation of a suite of conditions from your ecologist, should we be minded to grant permission. But you'll see that the recommendation is still a deferral to resolve that issue before we actually issue a decision. Subject to all the conditions.
But it is sort of, they're reaching some sort of agreement at the moment.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, so we now have an objector, Anne Raymond. If you would like to press the button on the microphone, and you will have your 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, councillors, for visiting the site. In the 100 comments on the planning portal, none of which supported the application, the local community have told you the impact we all believe the scheme will have on our amenity, our valued landscapes, our public rights of way, our rural lands, our heritage assets and our lives. Now you have seen the site for yourselves, could we perhaps remind you of the policies you could use to refuse this application? To protect the landscape, policies CL3, E10 and FC 1.1 seek to maintain and enhance the landscape. Your landscape officer said there would be significant landscape harm. Your public rights of way officer said the impacts in terms of views and experience will be significant. To protect agricultural land, which is more than 50% best and most versatile, you have policy CL11, CL17, E10. There are 85 hectares of prime food producing land being taken out of agricultural use. To protect the setting of Rutter's farmhouse, a grade 2 listed building, you have policy HB1. These fields once belonged to the farm and were part of a much larger Bramford Hall estate, which had huge influences in the local area, seen even to this day. Your heritage officer said there would be heritage harm. Policy CL8 seeks to refuse permission that threatens protected species. Your ecology officer has outstanding concerns for skylark habitat. If you think the use of Tie Lane with quiet lane status for large numbers of HGVs is unsafe for other users, or you think that there would be unsafe access or egress for any users of the access track, also a public right-of-way, you could use policy T10 and policy E10. Your highways officer said he wasn't happy about the use of Tie Lane. So did the contractor, Gruppetech, already on site. The impact on Little Sage Hill campsite and on residents. Some may be interested in visiting a solar farm for engineering curiosity, but trying to rest and relax and live next to noisy inverters from dawn to dusk for 35 years, probably not. H16 seeks to protect the amenity of existing residential areas. So there's 9 policies of the existing plan you could use, and from the emerging joint local plan, there's LP 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 24 and 27, all supported by the NPPF, including paragraph 187, which seeks to protect existing businesses from harm from new development. This EDF site is more than double the size of the recent Enzo appeal site. The cumulative impact of energy infrastructure in this area is already massive. Please don't give us more.
Are you on your final?
I am. We ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of the objector? Okay, thank you very much. I now call Martin Crack, who is going to speak as a supporter. You two have your 3 minutes. If you press the button on the microphone, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I can assure you that I do understand local concerns, and that I'm not a person who doesn't care about the areas that I farm. I've been farming in Suffolk for 44 years, and I've owned Tie Lane since 2000. So I have 23 years of experience of the land in question. I've been astonished and somewhat bemused by the comments relating to the productivity of the land from objectors. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person who actually owns the land and farms the land, along with my farmer contractors. We are the only people who have the knowledge of the productivity of this land. I can assure you that the land is average at best in terms of crop production, regardless of 3A or 3B. This is not prime agricultural land, and it's not as productive as other land as that I farm. I farm in Tie Lane with partnership of a local farm and family. I've kept them fully aware of the solar plans, and they understand our reasons for pursuing the project. Farming is increasingly difficult, emphasised by recent world events. I'm sure we all know about that. And I need to diversify to keep my overall farming businesses afloat and strong for the future. The solar farm, from our perspective, would help me to do that, to invest in new machinery and infrastructure on the remaining land that I have. It would be something that would provide me with much needed additional income to support my business. And without it, I do have genuine concerns for the future. I have chosen to let the land to be developed because it isn't the best farmland. Letting this agricultural land go for solar will help to ensure the future of my farming business. I was approached and have been approached by a number of renewable energy companies for solar at Tie Lane, and I decided to go with EDF because they have a grid connection, and I thought that they could do the best job, including consideration for the local community.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Mr. Crack? Thank you very much. I now call on the applicant, Darren Cumming. You two have your 3 minutes. You might just have to wait till the time has passed through, otherwise you won't get your full time, I'm afraid. I can't make it go any quicker.
I can say a bit
Okay,
more.
so you're okay if you'd like to begin now. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to go on the site visit today. We believe our application has been well prepared and we have responded to every request from the officer. This is including working closely to achieve the recommendation that is before you today. Examples of this include the archaeological trenching, which has led to the County Council withdrawing their objection on cultural heritage grounds. We've talked about the skylark mitigation areas, which we've agreed to, which is keeping the ecologist on board. And also we're improving Tie Lane for access, including the provision of passing bays and increased visibility at the site entrance, ensuring the county highways feel that we can use Tie Lane safely. It's been quite a long road of working with with our local consultants, your officers and advisors to get to this point. Please be assured that the application has been looked over in great detail and every possible mitigation incorporated into the scheme. EDF Renewals believe, as do your officers, that Tie Lane strikes the right balance between the environmental impacts and the need for low carbon generation. There are no perfect sites out there. They all have impacts, and Tie Lane is no different to that. Our site is not in a special landscape area, and where there isn't natural screening, we are proposing a robust landscaping plan. During the consultation process, we have moved panels away from gardens and provided buffer distances with additional planting. We are prepared to carry out additional planting and provide temporary screening to ensure that this is in place from day one. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about impact on agricultural land, and the overall impact of Tie Lane locally is minimal. And nationally, in order to meet the UK's solar ambitions, this will mean a maximum of 0.5% of land used for farming will be impacted. This will be less than the land is used for golf courses. To help ensure that the project is built safely, we will set up a community liaison group to ensure local people know what is going to happen. Our community fund will provide over £700,000 to be spent on local good causes throughout the life of the project. We commit to this on every solar farm we develop. Mid Suffolk Council is part of the Suffolk Climate Change Partnership, which declared a climate emergency in 2019, aiming to make Suffolk carbon neutral by 2030. Tie Lane will help deliver those ambitions by being a shovel-ready site should permission be granted today and start generating clean, low-carbon energy by 2025. This will provide enough energy for 14,500 Suffolk homes and save 17,100 tonnes of carbon emissions per year. I really wish I could say there are solar farms out there that don't have impacts on local communities who live near them, but that wouldn't be true. We need to balance that, and one thing I can commit to is that we'll build our project to the council requirements and provide benefits and the mitigations we say we will. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Maybe you could just answer the question about the inverter containers. We've been asked about what colour they're going to be, and I'd also like to know a little bit about the noise that they might or might not produce. So maybe you could just explain what they're going to look like and how much noise is likely to come from them. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the containers that house the inverters, they can be any colour that the council deem appropriate, and I believe under the planning conditions we would have to submit a colour scheme for those. They can be green or any colour that is best for integration into the landscape. Obviously, we've designed the scheme so that those inverter units are away from residential properties. There aren't any along the back from Rutter's Farm. They're well into the site, as well as Copenhagen Cottage. And I believe your environmental health officer is happy with the noise that to be created from those.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of the applicant? Councillor Penny, then Councillor Hardingham, then Councillor Elkin.
Yeah, could I just get some clarification on why the proposed site needs to be the scale that it is proposed?
Clearly, we're trying to maximise, the green, generation from our site, and we have looked at our scheme, in terms of scale and in terms of offsets from properties and ecological buffers and zones that we need to keep away from. And obviously we do have a connection at the Bramford substation, which we need to seek to utilise. And just to confirm, that is a maximum of 49.9 megawatts, not anything above that. We're fully aware of the NSIP guidelines and how that needs to be adhered to. The inverters are restricted to that 49.9 megawatts, and that is seeking to generate as the maximum amount of renewable energy from our side, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham, I think I said was next.
Right, thank you. If I could just return to the capacity of the site in megawatts. You state that it's in paragraph 2.2 that you're going to generate 67,500 megawatt hours per year. Now, my experience with solar panels, 10 years experience, suggests that there is no chance that you're going to make any significant improvement on 900 kilowatt hours per kilowatt installed per annum, which would mean that 67,500 megawatt hours per year is equivalent to 75 megawatts installed. Could you clarify that one for me, please?
Yeah, through the chair. In terms of that predicted output, that is based on our energy yield analysis has carried out that in terms of the irradiation in the area. In terms of the capacity factor, these panels are what's called bifacial, so they attract, they generate from both sides, not just one side of the panel. So they're more efficient than, say, panels that are on roofs of buildings, and so the technology is probably advanced over a number of years. We're comfortable with those figures. It's not, we don't feel it's an overestimation. And Councillor, I can assure you that the 49.9 megawatts that will be, the inverters will convert from DC power will be 49.9 megawatts.
And if I could just follow up on that one, the government estimate the best estimate I've been able to find is that your CO2 savings would be 0.223 of a kilogram of CO2 per kilowatt hour generated, which means that your 67,500 megawatt hours would be equivalent to 15 tonnes of CO2 per annum and not 17, as you state. It just seems that, an inconsistency there, which you seem to be exaggerating what the savings might be.
Chair, if I can just respond to that. Yeah, in terms of those numbers, Councillor, they are based on the average that are provided by the UK government. So we're not over-egging. We believe, and on the generation from that site, that it would, the number of homes will be 14,500, and the carbon savings will be 17,100 tonnes a year. And that, we're very clear about this, Councillor. We're not trying to over-egg anything there in terms of those numbers. We believe those are based on one, the actual energy predictions from this site using the panels that we'll be using, and secondly, on government numbers that we should do to make sure we're consistent across, all our sites and with the industry.
Thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Councillor Elkin?
Could you tell me how big the gaps are between the rows of panels, roughly?
In terms of the spacings can change, but it's around about 4 to 7 metres in certain locations.
And if it's obviously up to the farmer what he puts in his field, but if something like the Rural Payments Agency was okay with those wide rows being planted with something like AB8 grass seed with flower rich, that's flower rich, and the farmer claiming the additional payments for that, would that be acceptable? Does it cause any access problems, for example, because it has to be left to grow long until the autumn, or would that work fine with solar panels if the RPA was okay with that sort of use?
I mean, again, through the chair, we're more than happy to, as I say, there's detail to be agreed as part of this application through the proposed condition relating to the landscape management plan and the biodiversity improvement plan. And if that, that we can plan, a lot of the site with, something, if it's compatible with, and the farmer can, take some, some rural payments from that, then we're more than happy to do that, Councillor. And as I say, there's a lot of detail to be agreed, and I did give your office a draft example of a landscape improvement plan, which included a lot of detail around what we'd actually plant on the site and how we'd plant it. So I think that is something that we'd be more than happy to talk about through and agree through a condition.
Yeah, you can come back. Yeah.
It was more a technical question of, because obviously with AB8 you have to leave it to grow long. Do you ever need, to get machinery down the middle or anything like that? Or would you be just happy with, knee-deep grass between the solar panels for
these sites don't need a lot of maintenance. The panels do probably need cleaning, once a year, and probably the grass will need cutting once a year. So that's the plan. It's not heavily manicured, areas of land. It is left for biodiversity improvement.
Thank you. I mean, I don't think we can condition what the farmer puts in his own field, but just in terms of it having a significant impact for biodiversity, then it might be something we can talk about later. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question? The site visit was extremely helpful because you'd put some bits of fence and some marker posts about where your panels were going to come up to, where they were around the residential buildings. And yet when I look at the plan, is the plan the same as those, that distance you told us it was going to be from the Rutters, well, we first got off the bus and looked near Rutters Cottages. It looked like quite a long way away from that edge. And then I look at the plan and it looks like you've got your blue lines where your panels are going to go right up to the 5-metre hedge you're planning. And can we be assured that although we've got blue lines on the plans, you are going to have that distance from those residential properties, because it doesn't look obvious from the plan? Maybe are the plans accurately scaled as to where the panels are going to be, is what I'm really trying to say.
So again, Chair, in terms of where, we're more than happy, where we put those indications today is where the panels will be. And whether this can be controlled by a planning condition that we've agreed the exact final layout of the scheme before we go ahead, we're more than happy to do that to make sure we commit to what you've seen today.
Thank you. Councillor Penny, did I see your hand going up again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question about Tie Lane. Outside the 6 to 12 months of the construction phase, how much additional traffic would be generated by the site thereafter?
Very little traffic, Councillor, would come during the operational phase. As I say, there will be times where, items of equipment may need fixing, but generally you may see a transit van once a week at most. So very little traffic associated. There may be an annual service then that requires, the panels need to be cleaned, but that is, very little traffic, and you're not talking, massive amounts of, staff or contractors coming in during the operational phase.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys, did I see your hand go up over there?
Chair. Yes, I'm not sure how much discussion there has been between you and the Parish Council, but from one of the things that has been said, there is seen to be a need for further landscape mitigation along some of the footpaths in particular, which we became very aware of in the visit this afternoon. And you mentioned rural payments. I am a little bit curious as to how the immediate community will benefit from this scheme, or are there any benefits you can offer to them?
Job, if I can again, Chair. Look, Councillor, I mean, obviously we have proposed an indicative landscaping plan at the moment with hedges. If, you know, and this is, you know, sort of a commitment from EDF Renewables, if there is more planting needed along those footpaths in areas around the residential properties, we're more than happy to do that through the planning condition and involve the parish council and those residents in those discussions on those plans. So you know, we have provided an indicative plan, but that, as I say, is indicative, and we're more than prepared if the council and the parish council want that improved, beefed up, call it whatever you want, we're more than prepared to do that. And in terms of the maintenance of the landscaping, you know, the trees, hedges, wildflower sort of meadows, it's difficult to get communities involved in that. But, you know, if there is such a, you know, local, you know, body that can do that on our behalf, we would have to pay for that maintenance anyway. And if there is a local body that can do that, that's set up, then we're more than, you know, prepared to, providing they can do that work, you know, work with that organisation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair, was there another comment about were you on about the community fund, Councillor?
Yes, yes.
So that is set up on an annual basis of £20,000 per annum, which is 700,000 over the life of the project, index linked. EDF do that on all our projects, and there is a local body set up panel that will involve the parish council, local councillors, and, you know, other members of the community decide how that money's spent. And EDF, you know, make sure that it's the community decide how that money is spent.
Lovely. And that's index linked.
Index linked. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to make it clear that that wouldn't be a Section 106 payment. That's not something that's considered still compliant. So it's not really a material consideration. It's something that's you're getting for information here. But I think it's right to point out that you mustn't take that into consideration as material in your planning judgment. But it is a standard practice. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. If there are no further questions of the applicant, I now call on the ward member, Councillor James Caston. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and I'd like to thank all you and the members of the Planning Committee for coming and visiting the ward today. And it's really good to have you there and just seeing exactly what we're looking at. Just before this meeting, I was passed over, a resident passed me over something to a question, something that they wanted to point out, and I'll just read that before I start talking, if that's okay. The Construction Traffic Management Plan in Table 8.2 plans for an average of 3 movements per hour between 9 and 3 p.m. over a 6-month period. It doesn't give a maximum figure, and also it doesn't allow for the actual personnel that will arrive on site. So I think when we can...
I'm not sure we should be reading other people's sort of letters.
My apologies, but personally I think that we do need to look at the construction management plan.
The construction management plan, I think, is conditioned. Anyway, I don't think we've got any facts about the construction management plan at the moment, have we? Anyone?
It's a draft.
There's Chair. A draft construction management plan, is there? But that hasn't yet been agreed.
Just might need to check that with Bron, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I had a condition on, and we'll be looking to finalise the details through that condition, essentially.
Thank you. I think the construction management plan will be determined after today, what the final details are, that whatever you've got as a draft. So maybe the comments can go in writing, because I can't take in all those numbers anyway.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. And yeah, I'll make sure that happens. It is a query on it. yeah, you've been to the site now, and I think you can see the impact and how dense and intense this site is for renewable energy. The impact and on that footpath area, the Copenhagen cottage, and all round there the views from the road is absolutely enormous. It seems like there's so many solar panels crammed on this site. There seems to be very little other mitigation. I've looked at several solar applications recently, and there does tend to be a lot more mitigation on there. There's a 5-metre area of wood down the side. I don't really know what good I know probably some good, but not a huge amount of good a 5-metre area of woodland is. The wildflower areas are fantastic, but they're not anywhere that people can benefit from them. They're tucked away behind hedges. In my view, the area beside Rutter's Cottage, the small area, is not necessary. It's a very small area and it has a massive impact. And we did have a discussion about whether that could be dropped out, and I think that's something that I'd like to see the planning committee look into. It's a very small area with a massive area of impact. But I'd rather you didn't approve any of this. I think this is in the wrong place. I think the level of solar on the site is the absolute maximum it could be. The impact on the campsite is absolutely as big as it can be. We talk about not having tunnelling. All that up there will be tunnelled. There will only be solar panels and sky. There's not going to be anything else. All that view will be completely gone. I did go through this appeal and had a look at some of the rulings of the inspector on there, and I'd just like to share with you a few of the bits that I did mention the last time I spoke. Paragraph 36, it says that the impact is low of the Enzo solar farm. This is on the basis that some views are being filtered against the backdrop provided by woodland and existing transmission pylons. There's very little of that going on this site. The wider farm landscape, this is paragraph 39, the wider farm landscape character would prevail and would not appear to be industrial beyond establishment of the large pylons. There's a huge amount of industrialisation all down from one end of Tie Lane to the next, down at the start of Somersham Road. It's a massive industrialisation of the site. But the really important one, I think, that he says here is paragraph 63. Concerns have been raised in terms of the impact of the proposal on local tourism. This includes the nearby campsite and in terms of there's a very small campsite on the Enzo site. But it says, however, for relations of well-being, it's a very small, the Enzo site was very small, but this is absolutely massive. We've walked across it. It took a long time to walk from one side to the other. I'm not saying that solar couldn't be done successfully on this site, but I think the scale of this is just way too high, is too big. So I do think that this would stand up to appeal. I do think that that policies don't force you to approve this, and I ask you to refuse this planning application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Councillor Caston? Okay, thank you. So I now open this item up for debate. Is there anybody who would like to make a start? Councillor Haddingham.
Thanks very much.
you know, I'd like to say this is a tricky one, but I have to say, like I did last time, I don't like it. I think it's unacceptable, really. I think the impact is going to be too much. I think that the screening they've done is the absolute minimum they could do. I think the taking it back from the quiet road could be done. I think, like Councillor Casson said, that corner there by Rutters Cottages could be scrapped. I think they could do more, and I'm not at all happy with this, and that's my starting thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Penny.
I'd just like to follow Lavinia's point. I think, contrary to, I can't remember which speaker mentioned, perhaps James just now, thought that a 3 or 5 metre planting corridor wasn't that substantial. I personally think a 5 metre planting corridor does allow for a reasonable wildlife corridor, but they need to be connected and extensive.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Hardingham.
Just to follow up on the planting, the agent mentioned that the 5 metre hedge to the north of Rutters Cottage was going to be a 2-row planting, and I would have thought that you'd need an awful lot more than 2 rows in order to make a 5 metre wide hedge in a reasonable length of time. And from a wildlife point of view, I would think that 5 metres is helpful as a corridor for wildlife, but wider would be better. And I would support what Councillor Haddingham has said about mitigation and planting being inadequate, and I would like to see an awful lot more planting around the site, and particularly up the access track to Copenhagen Cottage, which I think is left very bare and industrial on both sides. Would be an unpleasant experience for the people who live and visit there.
Thank you. No one else seems to be leaping at the bit, so I find this a very difficult decision to make. It is large. It seems like a very large solar farm. I'm in a bit of two minds about the planting, because that footpath 8 that we walked along is very wide and open, you know, typical large Suffolk sky scenery. And I'm a bit concerned that if there's planting on both sides of it, it will feel terribly enclosed. But I don't know what having a load of solar panels either side of it, even if they are set back, I don't know if that will also make it feel enclosed, in which case maybe trees are better. So I'm in two minds. And when we came to that bit where the trees were on one side of the path, on the northern side of the path, it just sort of completely different character of a path. So whatever happens on this site, whether we put more planting on or we don't have any, I mean, if there are solar panels on there, it will have an enormous impact on the footpaths, the views of the countryside. Whether or not there's planting, it will make it totally different. I'm not denying that there will be an impact, but we have to assess that impact on all those, that energy being generated for 35 years, and then we have a better, more biodiverse, more fertile land underneath. And I think that is the big dilemma. There's no way it's not impacting anybody. It's certainly having a huge impact, but is that impact acceptable if we have a benefit from it? And that's what I'm tearing myself apart, trying to work out if we can mitigate that impact and say, yeah, okay, there is an impact, but we're getting all that solar energy, which is going to power 14,000 homes or whatever it was. There is a benefit, but there's also an impact. And I don't think I really know whether it's going to be, whether it's I know people don't like change, but, you know, we don't like the look of pylons, but there's hundreds of pylons over that field, and you almost sort of, they blend in with the landscape now. I'm not saying that this enormous solar farm is going to blend in with the landscape tomorrow, but maybe there'll be a time when we accept looking at solar panels on fields, because all the rest of the industrial work that's done in this country since the Industrial Revolution, you know, part of it is now part of our heritage. So, you know, I really am in two minds, and I don't know which way to go. But I think if we are going along the officer's recommendation and we want to do something about the planting, I think we need to tread very carefully and make sure that we fully engage the parish council as well as the landscape people to make sure that whatever planting gets put on there is what the parish feel is appropriate, because I think they're the people on the ground who know what it's like. So I wouldn't want to dictate, you've got to put more hedges on. I think we need, if we are going to dictate, we dictate that you talk to the parish council and ask them what sort of hedging and what sort of planting they would like. But I'll see what other people have got to say. Because he hasn't said anything yet.
Yes, I'm going to echo your remarks a little bit, Chair, as well. I mean, I too, I can't argue the fact that this is a large solar farm. It will have a visual impact. I think what there is at present in terms of mitigation along Tye Lane we've talked about 5 metres. I understood from the visit this afternoon it was going to be 30 metres behind Rutters Farm, you know, which is almost a small coppice, really. And I agree completely that whatever additional landscape mitigation there should be a three-corner discussion there, including the parish council, and to follow their wishes. Standing there this afternoon, whichever direction you looked, it was impossible to see the impact of man on that landscape. And it's not a natural landscape by any means. It's been farmed, there's been hedgerows torn up, there's been hedgerows put back. And the context in which we need solar energy, low carbon energies, has to be taken into account, I think. Will make a huge contribution. I wrote it down somewhere. 14,500 households. You couldn't feed 14,500 households on that amount of land, but you could keep their lights on. So decisions have to be made in that context too. And not only keep them on, but keep them on without burning fossil fuels. Okay, there will be some carbon footprint from putting the things in. In terms of, it's a temporary installation, though I probably won't see it taken away, should it be put there. But the recycling of the solar cells, this is improving all the time. There are now plants being built that will recycle 90% of the solar cells. I think what the proposed landscape mitigation, the trees, the hedgerows, the gaps being filled, will produce light, the possibilities of wildlife corridors. It could be improved. And that's where I am with it. Skylarks, I think, are a funny bird. They like a wide open space wherever it is. You can't predict whether they'll come back to a particular field or they're not a creature of habit like swallows, where they'll come back year after year to the same nests. But nevertheless, land is being put aside for them. I think it is of its nature a well thought through proposal. It will have a huge impact. It will have a change. But it is in an appropriate site when you regard the access to the substation, the existing grid connection. There will be disruption along Tie Lane, but for a year there'll be disruption. And again, that's going to be mitigated with further passing points and carefully managed. And we can put that into the Reserve Matters, the construction management programme. I'm a little bit concerned about the number of surveillance cameras. I think the cameras, whichever way they point you see them, that psychologically they're negative. And I think we could perhaps look at additional screening around the inverters, the containers, these sort of rectangles that are going to be dotted about. I think perhaps they need some additional screening to sort of make them disappear. Again, from the site, I mean, huge buildings like, not Unit 1, the warehousing in the distance, which you could see.
Port 1.
Oh, thank you. You know, those are huge buildings, but in fact, they're sort of, they do disappear into the landscape at a distance. So I'm not 100% comfortable with it, but I think it is, of its nature, a good proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Penny, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, I wanted to second your comments to begin with, because I feel exactly the same way on just about everything you said. I just wanted to draw attention to the existence of a report, which is the Wychwood Biodiversity Report for best practice for solar farms, which I think recommends a 6 metre corridor for planting to create wildlife corridors. But it also includes a variety of different habitats with ponds and other areas around the site, as well as planting different types of grasses and wildflowers. So it would be possible to create a very diverse area around there. And modern farming itself consists of a lot of monoculture. So looking at those fields that we've seen today, you can imagine that a quarter of those will be planted up with wheat and another quarter with barley, all in big blocks. So in of itself, modern farming is also quite industrial. I know large areas of solar panels are clearly very industrial and man-made, but they're just big blocks of things. And in the distance, as has been pointed out, you can see big blocks of buildings like Port 1. The density of some of the pylons could be considered another block, a mass of industrial monoculture. So the landscape effects are not particularly natural in that area. Certainly looking towards the west, I think to the east, I think the views to the west were a lot more natural, and the size of it is stunning. Do they need to be that big?
Thank you. Councillor, I'll do Councillor Elkin first, because she hasn't said anything yet, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Heading.
Thank you. Yeah, like everybody else, I'm really, really torn. We know we desperately need more renewable power, solar energy, as fast as we can possibly build it, but it's got to be in the right places. I mean, it's ironic that taking land out of agricultural production can make it much more biodiverse as a colleagues have said in terms of what's actually growing there. If it's wildflowers, yes, it would be lovely if people could enjoy them. Unfortunately, that's probably not going to be the case on a solar farm, but pollinators will still be able to enjoy them. So there is that benefit. We need the energy. The scale just seems enormous. I mean, we all know these things have to be economically viable and generate an appropriate return, but we did walk along tracks today where, even though we were shown with posts that there were panels coming up to within, 5 metres, 10 metres, I do question, did they have to come right up to the edges all the way along those footpaths? Could you still have an economically viable solar farm with just, leaving one panel off the end of some of those rows? Would it make an economic huge impact on the project, but it might make quite a big impact for the people who are living there and walking along those paths. So it did feel like every scrap of land had solar panels squeezed into it. So yeah, echo everybody else's comments. Would love to see a bit more space, a bit more breathing room, a lot more planting if it is going to go ahead. But yeah, really, really tall.
Thank you. I'll let Councillor Lay go next, and then I'll come back to Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you, Chair. Like many members of the committee, I'm also in two minds. We definitely need this type of energy. The walk today was incredibly well planned, but incredibly vast. A very long walk, and one can only imagine the impact for local residents. In all directions, development could be seen, and I have full sympathies with local residents. On the subject of planting, I would welcome any connectivity between copses and spinneys in the form of hedgerow corridors to see improvements for species such as dormice. Footpath 8 in particular, I personally feel could look quite impressive with planting to the south side. In terms of the comments made about feeling enclosed, I would highlight that for many months of the winter months, trees have a very different appearance. And I suppose I would really give full support to Councillor Penny's comments that there are further options for increasing biodiversity, and looking back at the plans, I would definitely welcome some consideration for these, but yeah, a very difficult one and definitely in two minds.
Thank you. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I just think that this could be improved. I think this is not enhancing the landscape one iota, and I agree we need green energy, but I just think it could be pulled back from the quiet roads. It could be pulled back from Rutter's Farm and the cottages there. It could be pulled back from Copenhagen Cottage and what's the place, Thai View Cottage. I think that they're being greedy. I think they could pull back from there. They could pull back from the footpath that we walked along. And I think it's been done to, like you say, with absolutely using every last square inch, frankly, to put panels on. And I think there's lots of places where they can pull back. We say we don't want planting to come right up to the edge of the footpaths, because then, what's the point of that when you can only see 2 metres either side of you? I think if the actual panels were pulled back, the planting could be, further away to still give you a bit of space when you're walking down there. And I think this could be vastly improved. And I think we were sent other applications back to have another thought, to think again and to reduce, frankly, the footprint of the solar panels. My own feeling is that lots of things are meant to be temporary, like the Millennium Dome and a lot of these prefabs after the war that were just meant to sort of last for sort of 10 years, and a lot of them are still being used 50 years later. And so I worry that after 35 years that this site will still be, like you say, I certainly probably won't be here, but I worry that this will continue to be a solar farm, for long after we plan it to be. But I grant you that's probably not the forum to get into that right now. So I'd like to propose, if I may, that they take this away and sharpen their pencils a bit. If that's a legal term.
So you are proposing that we defer it, and what do you want? What is going to be looked into as part of the deferral? I think we probably just need to clarify that rather than sharpen the pencils.
Reducing the area of reducing the area, basically. I think that the triangle, like James said, where the Rutters cottages are, could go. I think it could be pulled back from the quiet road. I think it can be pulled back from the footpath round Copenhagen Cottage and Thai View Cottage. That's my main things. But I think, yeah, pull back from the footpath. And so then, like I say, we can think about the planting rather than having it right on the edge in little teeny tiny little tracks that, you know, people have to go around the edge of. That's my first thinking, but obviously I'm open to lots of other, you know, people's ideas.
So I think we need a seconder for that. Councillor Elkin, you're happy to second. Councillor.
Well, I was going to comment on that. I think the developer had already agreed a willingness to allow for more planting. Does it need to be deferred to another meeting to allow that to happen?
Well, I was going to ask a similar question because I've already queried the fact that on the picture, on the diagrams, it looks like the solar panels go right to the edges, and yet what we saw today was that they don't go right to the edges. So is there any scope for that without it being deferred or not?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a couple of things possibly at play here. I would remind members of the scale of the plans. As you sort of say, this is a big area of land, so what you're seeing on the plan that might look quite narrow is perhaps bigger than one might necessarily envisage it. I think in terms of the landscaping and the width, if you have already got a setback, the opportunity for landscaping can be dealt with by condition. I'd be very happy to do that. That's one of the conditions Bron's proposed, so we could look to have wider landscaping and do that by condition. If, however, as I think Councillor Haddingham suggested, you want to sweep some of the solar panels back, I think we would need to defer in order to do that. And conscious of what we have done previously, if members were minded to go that way, I think we might perhaps need 10 minutes just checking with the developer that if they actually want us to determine the application in front of us, which we really ought to do, that it would be prudent to check that and that they are open to making those amendments rather than we defer, they haven't got any options in front of them and we come back and we haven't negotiated anything in any case. Does that help?
Yeah, and I think, can we just clarify that the bit of...
A lot less, so I think...
I think you were also talking about that bit of where we first accessed the site just north of Rutters Cottages. I think you were talking about actually not having that little trapezium.
That's what I'm saying. It's not just like a few
and that
extra
isn't
trees,
just
and I'll be
sweeping
happy.
it away.
I want, you know, flower meadows, ponds.
Councillor Hardingham, were you going to contribute to this debate?
Please, yes. If we can condition for greater setbacks, particularly for the access track to Copenhagen Cottage, I feel it would be responsible of us to actually try to make a decision today. I would like to suggest that one of the conditions we might impose would be that any planting took place in the first available planting season, namely this winter, which may well precede development, so as to give it the best possible advantage of getting ahead of the installation of the panels. But I feel we ought to take a decision today and to maximise the opportunity, as Councillor Penny has said, for joined up landscape features. That landscape is remarkably barren. It doesn't remotely resemble the Suffolk I used to cycle around as a boy in the 1960s with 5-10-acre fields where a 20-acre field was an absolute awesome site. So it wouldn't hurt at all to increase the amount of hedge lines and tree lines in that landscape at all. And it could be made a lot more interesting. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you for that, because I too feel that I feel that we should make a decision today, and if we're able to do so, and try and increase that buffer, that planting, and as Councillor Penny suggested, maybe put a bit of variety in some ponds or whatever into any of the wider bits to increase that. I think I would prefer to go make a decision about that today. I understand where Councillor Haddingham's coming from in removing that bit just north of Rutter's Cottage, and I guess that's what we need to decide. We've got the proposal for a deferral to go away and maybe remove that bit and bring everything else back from all the paths. So I presume we've got a proposer and a seconder for that, so we have to go through with a vote on that?
Yes, so the situation at the moment, because we have a proposer and a seconder, we would need to take that vote and see the outcome unless that proposal was withdrawn for any reason.
So given that we have that proposal for a deferral, would you like 5 minutes with the applicant? I think that's what you were saying,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
that was what I was suggesting. If we've got a proposer and a seconder, which we do, and that's what we would like to do, then I think
we need to do
just
that
gives
before
us
we go
the
further.
opportunity
Yeah.
that if they're happy to amend, then we can take that away. If they're not, and we need to consider where we take that, then we can do that today rather than have to come back in and do that again, if that's all right.
So, has anyone else got anything to say now? And then we'll maybe give the officers 5 minutes or 10 minutes to discuss with the applicant. Does anyone want to make any comments now? So, if we take a break, it's 7:10, so if we can be back, is 10 minutes?
Chair, I think Councillor Hardingham would like to.
Councillor Hardingham?
Sorry, I was just wondering whether it would be a possibility to take a kind of general sounding of the members at this stage before proceeding to that.
We have a proposal which has a seconder, so we have to that has to go through a formal vote, I think. Can we say we're back here at 20 past?
We'll go as quickly as we can, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and welcome back. So do we just need to go to Gemma for a little update? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So thank you, members, for that brief pause, just so we had a conversation, because what we want to do is to say we could do something, take it away, and then come back when there's no options to. So the conversation is that there isn't the capacity on their side to wholesale chop areas away, bring it in, but what they can do is take out a row of panels, maybe two in certain places like Rutter's Cottages and the other areas that have been mentioned. So that is a potential, so it would widen the landscaping. And noting that we have currently got a delegation to the Chief Planning Officer to sort out the Skylark mitigation, whether delegating authority to the Chief Planning Officer that we could review and amend the location of the panels with regard to those particular places, to include enhanced landscaping. There'd also been a mention of getting a permissive path through those. So again, that could be something that is agreed how that might come into play. Would it be secured, but it would be options and availabilities. That would enable us to prune in places, around the edges, increase it. Whether that is enough is up to members to consider, but that's the proposal that we could take away, but you have got options before you, and obviously we have got a proposal.
So that would be if we have a proposal to defer it, but the applicant is unlikely to come back with anything that matches the getting rid of the other bit. So we currently have that proposal on the table. If that doesn't go through, we do then have the option of adding some extra conditions and maybe having a different proposal. So
what you're saying is that they'll do a little bit, but not as much as I was talking about. So shall I withdraw my thing and then we just carry on discussing?
It's up to you that you can withdraw it. You and your
there's no
seconder.
point if they're saying we can do a little but not much, then I may as well withdraw my whatever proposal.
And your seconder.
If you're happy, and I think we should carry on discussing it. And I think I don't like it. I'm happy to go for refusal.
Okay, so that means that proposal is no longer there. So do we have any other proposals that might want to come forward, or does anyone else want to make any further contribution to debate? Councillor Penny.
I feel I'm lacking a bit of clarity on what specifically there is room for manoeuvre on. Was it, as Lavinia was suggesting, the boundaries could be set back a bit and then planting begin of a substantial nature and a biodiverse environment, or
depends how you
bits couldn't be removed?
Well, so it depends how you define substantial. What we're saying is there's the corner at Rutter's Cottages, for example, that I think Councillor Haddingham was suggesting cut off the corner and do away with. What our applicant is saying is that is not something they could do. What they could do is take off a row, maybe two panels, to increase the gap between the panels and Rutter's Cottage, and that they could increase, and that is to be agreed anyway, the landscaping scheme around the boundaries and through the site, so that we could get those biodiversity gains. And I know that we have got a couple of conditions about biodiversity that would also bring that together. So it doesn't go as far as cutting into the site, but it would just increase the distances, particularly to the neighbouring properties that were mentioned. So that was Rutter's Cottages, the Quiet Lane, Footpath, Copenhagen Cottage and Tyview Cottage. They were the particular ones I've noted, but if members wanted to do something slightly different, we could discuss that.
Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think, well, in response, I think it's very important in these compromises, if you like, about landscape that the parish council are actually really involved in their advice and suggestions are listened to. I think we haven't mentioned the colour of the inverters yet, so I think that needs to be in there somewhere. I think we have a responsibility to come to a decision tonight. There's two things pressing on my mind. One is the context, the precedent set by previous decisions and the planning inspectorate about solar farms, and how difficult it is to find material reasons for refusing them. And I do think, this is my personal opinion, but I do think getting the best possible deal for the communities in terms of mitigating the impact is the most important and the best we can actually do in these circumstances. We do have a responsibility, and this is part of our policy to support rural industries. Agricultural is a very significant rural industry, and this isn't the first time we've heard the argument. In order to make a farming business viable, solar farms provides a regular income stream, if you like, that supports that viability and in fact actually probably enhances the business overall. So I think that is a responsibility we have too in order. So I find the conditions the planning officers come forward, I find them acceptable. So I think I've put forward a proposal to accept this planning application.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the proposal? Councillor Hardingham.
I'm prepared to second it on condition that we stipulate that some of the limits of the solar farm are drawn back where they have most impact on people who live nearby, that the parish council and the residents consulted on the type of planting that they feel would enhance the site or mitigate as far as possible the negative consequences, and that the planting should take place this coming winter, if at all possible. And of course the usual things about planting being replaced if it should fail, and so on, and adequate precaution being taken for watering in case of drought.
Thank you. Are you happy with those additions, Councillor Warboys? Absolutely. Yeah. And can I just add that I hope that in this discussion we've included all of the proposed planting, landscaping, whatever you want to call it, to try and get it as biodiverse as possible, because we had some good suggestions from Councillor Penny about putting some water features and getting as wide a variety as possible. So is that all encompassing in that condition about the planting and the setback from the paths and the domestic properties?
Yes, Chair, I think so. We've got a variety of biodiversity conditions. We've already had some ecological surveys, and that the development has got to comply with those. So we have done one part. Obviously, we've got the skylarks to follow, which would be subject to agreement with our ecologist. And in terms of the landscape planting, that would be part of that biodiversity package altogether. Would it help if I ran through what I've got to make sure I've covered everything?
And we've also discussed having the parish council involved in discussing what gets planted, and do they also need to have make sure that they are fully on board with whatever the construction management plan is? Can they also be consulted on that?
Yep, I think we could do the construction management plan in consultation with the parish council. So let me just add that part in, and then I think I've got everything.
So that's all right with the proposal and the seconder?
Yeah, if everybody. So that was the construction traffic management plan in consultation with the parish. So my suggestion at the moment, Chair, hopefully this covers everything, is that we are, put it in the wrong place, sorry, my computer skipped, is that we are going to delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer to review and amend the location of panels with regards to Rutters Cottage, the Quiet Lane and Footpath, Copenhagen Cottages, and Thai View Cottage, including enhanced landscaping and permissive path provision in consultation with the Parish Council and neighbouring residents. Then, as recommendation on pages 18 and 19 of the late papers, with additional conditions to agree the colour and landscape screening of inverters, to undertake the construction traffic management plan in consultation with the parish council, and then amend condition 17, which is currently the landscape planting scheme, to include advanced planting prior to commencement of development to be agreed. So the timing of that essentially can be agreed, but that we're requesting it in advance. It's difficult to say this winter, next winter, without knowing when they start. But by agreeing that, it gives us the opportunity to do so. I hope that covers everything, Chair.
I think I'm okay with that. Councillor Warboys and Councillor Hardingham, do you think we've got everything encapsulated there? Councillor Warboys? I think we can now go to the vote. Area Planning Manager's already read it out, so I don't think she needs to read it out again. And the Governance Officer will conduct the electronic vote. Now, are Councillor Warboys and Councillor Lay on the system yet?
Yes, Councillor Warboys isn't, but Councillor Lay.
Right, so everyone else can do it electronically?
Yeah, yeah. So, members, that vote is in progress. It has been updated to reflect what Gemma has read out. Councillor Warboys. Thank you. Yes, thank you, members. Chair, that is 6 votes for and 1 against. That's carried.
So that is now carried. That application has now been approved with all those conditions. And we don't have any further cases to discuss. Item number 8 on the agenda is about future site inspections. Do we have any more requests for site inspections?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So I can now formally close the meeting at 19:33. Thank you very much.